Hi, everybody. Kat here, and I want to welcome you back to the Adventure Paradox podcast. We have here a return guest. She was actually on the show when we were Horses, Mountains, and Dogs. I am a long time fan of Kim McElroy. If you do not know Kim, she is an incredible horse artist. She really gets into the depth of the spiritual nature of horses. And today we are going to talk about her debut as an author and illustrator. Kim, how are you and where in the world are you today?
I'm great. It's so great to connect with you again. It's like familiar ground, familiar trails for sure. And where am I? I'm in Kingston, Washington, in my studio. You can see a little bit of my art behind me. My mare Dharma is watching over my shoulder as usual, even though she's in spirit now. So that's really appropriate to have her looking over at you and us and all of us.
Always. And for those who can't see her, I would love to describe this eye. And I know there's a reflection inside the eye, and also just talk about horses' eyes in general. Can you tell us a little bit more about Dharma's eye and some of the meaning behind this particular piece?
Yeah, absolutely. That piece actually is called Dharma's Reflection, and it was created for the card deck that I co-created with Linda Kohana in 2007. And Dharma was the mare who I adopted as an ex-racehorse. And when I was having trouble communicating and understanding her behaviors, she was so post-traumatic from the racetrack. And I was a novice beginning horse owner, so it was completely new to me to understand her emotions. And so through a long series of events, I connected with Linda Kohanoff and we co-created that deck. So this work of art, Dharma's Path, was actually total synchronicity as things go, you know. I actually had taken a photograph of her in her stall, all the many times I photographed her, but this particular time, this was back before digital photography, film photography. I was just taking a picture of her beautiful eye. And when I got the photographs developed in this tiny little, like the size of my pinky fingernail, I could see her eye had something reflected in it. And when I enlarged it with a magnifying glass, I could see it was the shape of her self, her horse self. And my first reaction was, is that it's not me, but I always wanted to be a horse. So at first, that was my first reaction. But secondly, I went, no, that's her because the door to the stall was behind her. And I couldn't ever explain that. I've asked photographers along the way, and everyone has said that's not possible. It actually physics couldn't reflect from your camera lens, etc. So it was truly a miracle. And then so appropriately became the card for self-reflection in the way of the horse card deck. So that Dharma's always been, Dharma means the chosen path in Buddhist philosophy and religion. So that was her given name. So, that was always meant to be. And I know she's still watching over me.
Oh, always. And I love that story. And also just these moments where they can't be explained. Like it doesn't, there's no explanation for, the aperture and it came in up
Right.
down and whatever. It's like it just is. And then you created something, you captured it, you took what was and turned it into this beautiful piece. Let's touch a little bit on horses, specifically maybe race horses and emotion, because I'm sure you've seen this thing. We just, went through the whole, Triple Crown, right? Spring. And I remember seeing this going around saying, tell me you're a racehorse without telling me you're a racehorse. And they start playing the horns, dun 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 dun, dun, and these racehorses are like looking around in their
Oh,
pasture, just hearing it, right? They're taken
wow.
right back.
Oh my
And
gosh.
and it was interesting because it was like meant to be sort of funny, but when you go a little deeper, and I have also an ex-racehorse, a lot of what racehorses are experiencing is very far from funny. So with
Hmm.
your first racehorse and also coming in with beginner's mind, you were saying, you weren't quite equipped with maybe some of the knowledge that more experienced horse people might have about racehorses. What was your experience with Dharma and connecting with her emotions as an ex-racehorse?
Yeah, so I was, completely new to horses in general. I had only I'd been a horse lover all my life and drew them in my art. And at that point, I'd had my art career for several years. And people always would say, "How can you possibly draw that if you don't live with horses?" And it was like, well, I am one, so
Mhm.
it's just part of me. But on the other side of it, the physical reality of horses was very new to me. So when I rescued Dharma, when we bring an animal into a better way and away from the stress of her competition, but also her, I would say, her loneliness,
Mm,
um, then it was a new beginning point of completely starting from scratch. So I didn't even understand how to handle a horse, much less how to handle a horse that had challenges
mm,
or confusion or was fight or flight basically.
yeah.
So through all of those experiences, I began realizing that there was something big, that was not just what people were telling me was something, she was misbehaving, or that she was not confident, or this or that, all these labels that people put on horses. And very very soon after that, I mean, I credit her so much with leading me into the path, not down the path, but into the path of sentient communication, because I had to find answers because she was
Mhm.
unsafe in many
Mm,
ways for me to handle, and to provide her with the loving home that I wanted to give to her. And people told me, just, sell her. She's not rideable. She's not safe for you. And I'm like, that's not what it's about, and I never even really was a born rider anyway. I just wanted to be with her. And so long story short, she over time, she also introduced me to the concept of animal communication, and at that time finding animal communicators, which in that era, that was 95-ish. That was a beginning concept. I heard the other day someone in the profession of horse training, she said now animal communicators are, everywhere, and every barn has their animal communicator. And I'm like, that
mm.
is just amazing and so cool. But back then it was unique. And so I tracked down someone, and she was a gifted communicator from Mount Shasta named Sharon Callahan, and she did flower essences and healing work. And that was all completely new to me. And now it's like, it's in my back pocket all the time. And she was the first one who introduced me to the concept right from the get-go when I described Dharma's behaviors without even knowing me or what I was going through in my life. Her first question was, "Wow, do you have anything in your life that is stopping you from, that you're bolting from away from, or that you're freezing and getting anxious about?" And I was like, "What?" You know?
Mhm.
And it was just astonishing. It never occurred to me that she could reflect I mean, this was all new. Now there's neuroscience to prove all this, and, heart math and everything, but that was new to me. And it gave me a different perspective. And then that conversation, probably about a year later, Linda Kohana reached out to me because she met Sharon Callahan, heard the story about Dharma. She repeated the theme of, Dharma was reflecting some of my life issues as well as her own, like it made it bigger. And
Mhm.
and then Linda reached out to me and said, "I'd like to share that story in the Tao of Equus." And that's kind of how we met. So Dharma had this all in mind, I'm sure, in her soul agreement with me. But
Of course.
yeah, so it was really astonishing to and even now, even though animal communication and these themes are becoming sort of more recognized, and you can pretty much broach that subject with an animal person, if not someone else, about that. But there's still a lot of, I would say, misunderstanding, or, the dominance hierarchy perspective is still prevalent in the horse industry, and racehorses in general. I would say, the use of horses for sport it, it's so hard to break through that. There's got to be a term for it, like the wall of you know, I just spoke with someone the other day who said that her mother, and she's a very enlightened person, that I was speaking with, and she said, I so struggle because my mother and her grandfather were always in the racing industry, and they're just convinced that these horses are having a good time, that they're
Mm,
perfectly well cared for, and that they're actually just fine, and there's nothing wrong, and that there's a price to pay. Sometimes, sports people are injured too, so that kind of thing.
mm.
And I actually did a card reading from the deck we're going to be talking about racing, and that was really revealing too. But definitely, just from the basic principle of trauma and what a natural horse should live like in a herd and able to move and not be locked in a stall for 23 hours a day. And you could go on and on. And some horses are more sensitive than others. Some of them recover from that and they can move on to happy, healthy lives. Other horses like Dharma were completely traumatized. Their nervous system is traumatized. So she didn't exhibit those behaviors when I first met her. She seemed perfectly happy. And the day I met her, she seemed fine. Like, this is my home. These are my people and my horse companions, and this is how I live. That's is what I've known. But then when she was in any kind of unfamiliar situation, like moving across country in a trailer and having a fractured knee from racing where she couldn't walk down a ramp or move in the way helped her feel secure, that compromise exacerbated her trauma. And then just the fact that she was in an unsafe world with a herd that she didn't know and all those things threw her into the state of, nothing could be normal again. And even once I provided her with the farm that we acquired, which was home and heaven on earth, and a herd, there were times where, any given thing could be a real struggle for her.
Yeah, I think of it a little bit like working with a Vietnam vet, where there are just things that we can't possibly understand that someone else has walked through in literally a war zone. I feel like this concept of what it's really all about that came through when you had people saying to you, she's too much horse for you. You should get rid of her. You can't even ride her, right? And you recognizing that's not the sole contract here. Like and the fact that people were even and this is true today, this idea of use with horses, right?
Hmm.
Um, and something we touched on before we started recording was even in horse therapy, like, are we acknowledging the horse? And this is true with therapists too. This sort of new line of work. Is the therapist allowed to be a human therapist, also going through something, even as they're serving someone else? I'd love to hear you touch a little bit more on this concept of use.
Yeah. Well, I think that, I would say use usually equates, well, there's two kinds of use. There's use for ego and there's use for money. There's more than two kinds, but I would say those are sort of the dynamics that we run into with horses. And so sports and, and that kind of thing can be money related, especially with
Mm,
horse racing. Then it's doubly money related because it's not only the money the horses can earn, but it's the betting public, right?
right.
It's the gambling, legalized gambling. But then on the other hand, it's the ego of wanting to harness this incredible being and this energy and ride into the sunset with the power that horses embody. And if it's a willing partnership, then yes, how beautiful. But there's compromise that can happen in that dynamic when we don't listen.
Mm,
And I think that in the therapeutic realm, I'm astonished and fascinated by the amount of sort of how it's become like a thing. It's become a profession, a recognized profession, which is wonderful. I'm thrilled. It usually means, hopefully, that horses are given a purpose and a home where they might not otherwise have if they're not
mm,
necessarily rideable. And there's all sorts of wonderful reasons why this shift into seeing horses as sentient beings and therapists in their own right can be a beneficial thing for their species. But it also is, uh, you know, the highly conscious people can be attending to how the horses are that day, and they do that. But because
Mm,
it's become a profession, and it's like everybody and their, you know, th everybody that's certified seems to have the ability now to certify others, and
mm,
there's just a whole lot of um shifting going on in that realm, and I don't even keep track of it, but it just appears like every time I turn around, I see some post about these people training and these people being certified in this or that, and and how it's just fascinating, to see how it's grown, how this field has grown. It's exciting, but it's also there's no sort of oversight in terms of how people experience that, and what the horse's role in that, is how they're supported in that. But I would say for the overall big picture, like I don't ever feel like with racing, say when they stop performing, they go down the road of no return usually.
mm,
They often can. I shouldn't say usually, but the ones that can't be ridden have a harder time than those that can, etc. But I would say that you don't ever get the feeling that therapy horses, get sold on, like they usually have a home for life, and that's the ultimate goal, of course, and what we hope for. But yeah, there's just a deeper conversation of what horses are benefiting from the co-creation of work, and do they even want that job?
right.
That's where the listening comes in.
I want to draw a horse card and really go deeper in this listening, but before I do, this particular deck, the Council of Horses Oracle, it's a 40 card deck and guidebook, which you also wrote. You're not just the illustrator, you're also the co-author. And I'd love to hear you explain where the idea of the council came from, and also define it for our listeners.
Sure, yeah. Well, I think that all of us feel that there's spiritual guidance in many forms, and that it's not just human based, that angels come in many forms, and some of them have four legs, and some of them are horses. And so uh, I've always believed that ever since the very beginning when I did a shamanic journey with fully intending not to see a horse because I thought I would be making it up. And and I wanted so to have this, incredible experience of an epiphany. And yet it was an epiphany because it was a horse, and it was a white winged horse. And the
Mm,
white winged horse told me that I had been one with him for a time, and that he would help souls who crossed over, who weren't ready to or able to access insight from a human guardian.
mm,
And so what a profound realization. I mean, I couldn't have asked for more in that guided journey to understand this is why I have had this mission all along, and that it just explained it. I was already doing it at that point, and it had been so supported in that work in my life, but it gave it even deeper purpose. And
mm,
then so I've always asked these questions, and every horse I encounter, that's the question we discuss. When I say discuss, I mean, my intuitive dialogue with them to paint them basically is my way of having a conversation and a dialogue with who they are. If it's a horse that's here to be here for interpretation for a wide group of people, then that was sort of a certain level of my work, and became representative of a concept, or you could say it was like an archetype or a myth
mm,
that for instance, Spirits Take Flight is a beautiful bay Arabian leaping into the air, and behind him is an eagle that is bigger than him, and they are both blended. Like you can't see the difference between the eagle and the wing of the horse, and yet it's not a Pegasus; it's an eagle and a horse combined. And that concept was a concept that came to me that you could say if this was, thousands of years ago, it was Greek, a Greek myth was built around it, right? So
Mm-hmm.
that's essentially kind of where some of this evolved was asking questions and co-creating with Sandra Wallen and working with her in the work that we did. We taught Drawn to Horses workshops and we went and studied with the wild horses and we were both very intuitive. So it was a natural collaboration. And I began asking questions in meditation, saying, what is the work to be done here? And that was when I encountered through a being that I believe is a spirit guide that I have met several times. I call him Akashkua, and he is, or he calls himself Akashkua. He was the first horse that I actually got a name from when I asked. And I've since learned linguistically that that name is very similar to interpretations that mean Akasha or Akashic,
Akashic
as in
records.
Akashic records, and Kua means in different languages can mean made of. So his beingness, the way I encounter him is as a blue sky and cloud horse that is
Mm.
partly invisible but partly there and is just amazing. And so I say he, she. And so that being, I asked, can you take me to an understanding of horse consciousness? And he led me through his sort of, I went into him like you would go into a portal, and I arrived in my mind's eye in a forest, and in front of me was a red horse with a red fiery mane lit up in the sun. And he beckoned me to follow him, and his name is Red Bear, and he's also in this deck. And Red Bear led me to a clearing in the forest, and there was the presence of unknown, unnamed horses waiting in a circle, like, and it
Mm.
just the council, it felt like an elder council. And then I came out of the vision, but it was just clear as a bell, and not every vision is clear, so that was a
Mm.
sign as well. So that was profound and just gave me the feeling like there's work to be done. Now that vision was back in, I keep getting the dates wrong, but I think it was 2011 or somewhere in there. It's been a while. And it took a long time to manifest what did that mean. And but I think initially when I told Sandra about it, that was the first place we went was this is a card deck. And it's taken a long, wonderful time to write, which is interesting in and of itself. Like it wasn't okay, we're just going to whip this out. You know, it took time to understand it. It took time to reflect on it and create it and write it and paint it and then and in the process of doing all that in total faith of you know of anticipating its um, worthiness and it having a voice. We
Mm.
just kept finding how do we pursue the actual publishing of it because we knew we wanted it to get out there in the world. We didn't want to just not just there's a lot of self-publishing options now, but we it was important to get it out there, and so it took over a year agent to find a publisher willing because publishers think that horses are a niche market, and so they think equestrians are what drives the horse world, the horse interest, and we kept trying to point out, it's nothing to do with that's part of the horse fascination, but you ask any given person and they'll light up,
Yeah.
or they'll know someone who loves horses or
Yeah.
whatever. So yeah, that's how it kind of started.
In a moment, we will pull a card from this deck, and I love that story and the vision and going into meditation and getting this really clear, clear as a bell, right? Understanding of the council and being drawn to the council. It's making me think of, and I have here beside me a Breyer horse modeled on the original Breyer horse that was on a clock, if you remember, in
Wow.
1950, right? This is not an original, it's a model.
Yes.
But You know, Breyer's tagline, and the day that we air this interview is going to be the weekend of Breyerfest, which happens at the Kentucky Horse Park. And really coming back to that love that we, I believe, as horse people, and I believe everyone is a horse person, but not everyone has accessed that part of themselves or decided to fan the flame of their love of horses in this lifetime. However,
Right.
I would love to really touch on, and this is something we chatted about earlier, and their tagline is "A horse of my very own." And it's a very interesting event. I don't know if you've been to it or not, because you have a lot of
I've heard of
adults.
it. Yeah.
Well, it's not even they have real horses
Actually, I heard
showing
of
up.
it through your podcast because of the
Probably,
pictures that you
yeah.
sent. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. But what's very interesting about it is a lot of people, this is enough. Just the model is enough. Just the idea is enough. And not everyone is actually called to go through the experience of owning a horse, making those decisions about riding, not riding, you know, employing an animal communicator or not, call like all of the different decisions, right? And I know that you have had many horses in your life now and many living on your property with you, and that since the last time we spoke, you're now an empty horse nester.
Yeah.
And I'd love to hear you just touch on, I think, for people who maybe don't have horses, how you connect with horses now that they're no longer physically in your space anymore, but in that spiritual plane.
Absolutely. Excuse me. I think that it's interesting the a horse of your very own because of course so many of us started with that dream and as did I, Briar horse or plush horse or art or whatever form it took for me to express that love that I was born with that lit me up anytime the word or image of a horse came. And as I often say in my biography, you know, I was crazy about horses since time I could hold a crayon. So I knew I was born with that, and some of us are born with that.
Yep.
Uh, but when it came time to engage with horses. And I was signed up for riding lessons because that's what you did and that's what you still do
Mm,
for girls, particularly girls, but also boys. I'm always thrilled when boys are fascinated by horses because, they were the original, kind of connection so many hundreds of years ago with the military and cowboys. And there's a deep love and bond between men and horses as well. And I think it's not
mm,
really embraced in our culture. But the concept of then when I had physical horses in my life, what I became aware of was that was a crash course in how to embrace my ability to be a parent because I
mm,
didn't have children.
mm,
I needed to stand up for myself with on my horse's behalf because I tended to find horses that needed situations that were better than what they were in, and I had to rise to that occasion because they were held by people against their will in some cases, and I had to find ways around where I normally wouldn't have confronted someone, for instance.
mm.
So that was some huge lessons, and in the caretaking realm of their health concerns and all the other animals that I adopted. So we started here with a horse, a goat, a dog, and a cat when we moved to this farm in 2000, and within 4 years we had 21 animals. So it was a rocket science, and so now it's actually um, it's it's there's the grief, of course, and there's the missing every single day, and there's the feeling of the presence of the horses on the land. And we're so grateful that we have this land and we're still on this land. So we have that connection and the memories. And there's also sort of like before BH, before
Yeah.
horses, um, I was I had a certain understanding of the spiritual nature of horses and just an intuitive connection with them that was undeniable and that people resonated with and told me was true. And therefore that reflection just went right back into the work and right back into what I was creating and have done so all along. And now that I'm in the tail end of having said goodbye to my herd, and them showing up in the Council of Horses Oracle as some of the beautiful mentors that are reaching people now in an ongoing sharing that's so profound. Um, there's definitely a sense of closure, but it's also an expansion of who I've become because of their assistance.
Mm,
Um, and yet because I'm connected spiritually, it's just part of my being to, my sister-in-law, who's a gifted author, she wrote Animals as Teachers and Healers way
mm,
back in, that was probably 96 or so, Susan Chernak McElroy. And she just asked me this question one day. She said, so why horses? What is horses for you? Why would you define that? And I said, horses are my experience of the divine.
wow.
And, it's how I access that insight, that power, that information from the universe in a sort of condensed form, you might say, or a form that I can define, that I can actually understand. And everything goes through that filter for me. So whether I'm, reading something inspirational that has nothing to do with horses, I am interpreting it through horse wisdom, right?
Wow.
And then when I discovered people like Linda Kohanoff and gifted, naturalists and behaviorists and trainers and, Carolyn Resnick and all these beautiful people that I've studied with, uh, that just supported my understanding of how that works in me.
Mm, mm,
And then I encounter other people that have that glimmer, even if they've never had horses, but they have this little interest like, and maybe are a little feeling like I don't understand this or that spirituality or this or that. I even like recently I studied some Buddhism for meditation and I was like, wow, it's really complicated, like just a t taste of it. And yet, if I can embody it with the horse wisdom, it makes sense to me. So
yeah.
it's very fascinating. And I think that more and more people are, um, well, I would say there's people who are becoming more aware of it because of the therapy aspect and how that is becoming kind of a catchphrase and an
Hmm.
everyday sort of
Hmm.
experience. And there's lots of documentaries and movies about it that are coming out. But also there's the exponential, or what would you say, the opposite interpretation, which is that our cultures increasingly are distancing themselves from nature in general and horses equally so, and therefore our kids and our school children and young adults growing up that have no exposure to horses whatsoever because 100 years ago that they were in every backyard and
Right.
every part of our culture or our cultures around the world and still are in some places in the world, but as beasts of burden. But equally, at least they were in in our consciousness. Now, there's almost it has to be a reminder of, and
Yeah.
that's what we really wanted to why we wanted the Council of Horses Oracle to reach out to those people because it'll be on the bookshelf. They'll see it and they won't be thinking about horses when they come in the Barnes and Noble, but or whatever bookstore. But that's how we hope it'll get the ripple effect out there.
Totally. I love your mic drop moment with your sister asking you, what is it about horses? And then you realize like horses are my experience of the divine. I mean, I think for so many that will resonate. And for those it doesn't resonate with, you said something earlier, and I was thinking if we think about the acronym phonetically, BH before horses, buh, 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 and then there's AH after horses, ah, 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 right? And I feel like, again, for those who are called through this portal, and these cards are such a beautiful way to take us there. And we're going to pull one now to wrap us up. But it's like there are so many doors and portals to access your equine consciousness and connect with the council, even if you do not have horses in your life. And I think for me, I'm 44 and I grew up in Wenatchee and Santa Fe and parts of California and Colorado. And I go back to a lot of these places now, and my grandmother in the suburbs of Chicago, and the horses are gone. They're gone. Like they have moved out of the suburbs. They've moved out of the suburbs of the suburbs. And when we lived in the suburbs of Chicago, we would ride our horses down the public Des Plaines River Trail. And I recognized it was like a public service because so many people would come up having never seen a horse. And to just let them come up and touch and be embraced in the energy of a horse. And
Wow.
that divinity, right, is like such a gift to share and support someone to have a before horses and after horses experience and maybe
Yeah,
even
they'll never forget
go
that moment.
never
Yeah.
forget it, but like
Yeah.
to go find their own and again to remember you could access horse consciousness through meditation, through working with these cards, like through connecting with a spirit guide of sorts if you are in a space where you cannot physically find the horse manure within your horse radar because it is out there somewhere. It just might be quite far. And I think the other interesting thing is horse people as a rule, and the more horse people I talk to, it's really interesting where we are now here in Idaho, where it's like, yeah, come on over. And then there are other spaces where it's like the gates are higher and higher. So instead of longer tables or bigger barn doors to welcome people in. They're closing people out because of liability concerns and all these different things. So it's just a very interesting time. And I agree with you that people are being called back to their essential nature, to horses, that there's this deep calling, and I think it's going to get louder in our lifetime with
Hmm.
technology and screens and all these things that are calling us away from going deep into that reflection of ourselves, like you created with Dharma's eye. And there is something about the horse eye and like being one of the largest mammals. Do you know
I've
what
heard
about
that too, that they're actually I think it's the largest mammal's eye, is including whales. So you would think a whale would have a larger eye than a horse, but horses have the largest eye. Yeah.
it? And what is
Maybe it's
that?
proportional, I'm not sure, but it's something like that.
It's
And
amazing to
so
think
they're so
about.
reflective, and that was why it was so perfect, of course, that Dharma showed herself to me there because I'm always looking for the reflections in the eye. That's one of the things that I always have painted is horses'
Hmm.
eyes with some kind of image in them. So yeah, I they because it's that mirror image, that mirror reflection, right? It's what they're seeing and what's reflected on their eye and what's in their environment that's it's just layer
Hmm.
after layer.
Hmm.
Hmm.
Okay. So I'm going to ask a question based off of the eye because I feel like it's
Great.
kind of waking something up. So let's just ask, and I'm going to ask with my left hand because I believe that helps us connect spiritually to the other side of our brain. A horse in the horse council in this deck who's going to connect us to see something differently, the way the horses see it, and help our listeners to hear something new.
Beautiful.
Feeling this one today. Oh, Choctaw ponies.
Oh, wow. That's wonderful. Yeah. And look at the reflect, well, the reader won't, so let's describe it. It's two mares and two foals in a peaceful position looking back over their shoulders, and behind them is the red road as it's often referred to in native
Mm,
traditions. But in front of them and around them it's almost like a mirage, like their images are reflected down below them as if they're part spirit and part horse.
so beautiful. Okay. And do you want me to read it or do you want to read
Sure.
it?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. So we have your book, and so it's alphabetical. So let me get to Choctaw. I love that you have Chiron's Way in here because my first horse was named Chiron, by the way. Put
Uh-huh.
together.
Yes. Chiron is the wounded healer archetype and the centaur in Greek mythology.
Totally.
Centaur is a bit different than some of the ones we've seen. I don't know if you had spotted him yet, but he's quite something.
Actually, let's see. I'll take a look. Ooh, yeah. Wow, that's a really nice one. You can see the pictures. I don't know if you'll see it very well
Yeah,
in black and white
he's
here, but
he's covered in tattoos like a modern human, but he's got ancient Grecian tattoos on him, which is a whole story in and of itself. And then behind him is the shape of a horse head in the rocks. He's in
yeah.
his cave in which is an actual cave in Greece, Mount Pelion, and that
Wow.
is the actual cave. I found an architect, or sorry, archaeologist who had taken a picture of that cave, and I said, "That's it."
That's the one. That's powerful. Okay. Uh, Let's segue over there to
Right.
Chiron's Way for just a moment because
Okay.
finding wisdom in the wound, nature and nurture, embodied healing, and beauty from brokenness. So good. Let's just read the message for humankind. Again, this is Chiron's Way. The world needs healing, but start within. Find the beauty in the places you've been broken. And then there's a message for horsekind. On humanity's behalf, you have been initiated in the art of the wounded healer. However, you are not bound to this role. Ooh, I feel like that goes back
That
to
goes
what we
right
were
to our
talking about earlier.
conversation. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
so good. Okay, so that one, clearing that, moving back to our question to see and hear something new with the Choctaw ponies, return to freedom. Hope, resilience, living purposefully. Ooh, good one. Message for humankind. Follow the path of goodness and truth. This is so appropriate because I just did this Speak Truth to Live summit and been talking to all these folks about what's your truth? How do you access it? How do you speak it? Are you living it? It's really amazing. Message for horsekind. You have carried the burden of tears long enough. It is time to return to freedom. So good. Will you tell us a little more about this red road?
Yeah, so the good red road is often interpreted as living a purposeful life, living uh, despite the obstacles that, I mean, this is my interpretation, but despite the obstacles that life might throw at you or your culture or your um, past, your family, that there's a way of moving forward that can give you purpose and without always just feeling sort of held back.
Mm, wow.
Yeah.
I feel like you and your work, you embody the red road, Kim.
Oh, thank you.
You're,
That's high praise. Well,
it,
yeah, I've been on the horse is the one that helps me walk that path.
yeah, you can
Mhm.
feel it. One of my guests on the summit last month, Christopher Van Buren, he talked about doing a meditation where you step out and you observe yourself as the meditator. But then he said, I want you to take it one step further and observe the observer of you. And I feel like, again, when we're working with horses, we start to see not just ourselves and our horse and connecting to the horse, but you're also in this greater ecosystem that the horse is connecting to. Um, it's such a
Yes.
powerful gift. Okay, we could go on and on. We do need to wrap up. Please tell people where they can find you, your artwork, your new book, and how they can and follow along and connect with you.
Oh, well, I'm delighted. Thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to reach all of you out there because it's my favorite subject. So anytime you want to reach out to me, please do. And I sell my art online with my website, spiritofhorse.com, and my e-cards, which are kind of old-fashioned, but they're really cool. They're spiritofhorsecards.com. And yeah, just connect with me and tell me your story and we can share that love of the horse because that's what connects us. And we have a niche market and it's not a market. It's a it's a co-creative process of inspiration.
I feel like it's not a market, it's a field. Like
Right.
it's
Which
reminding
is
me of,
ironic, isn't it? It's that play on
right?
words.
We'll see you in the green pastures.
Yeah,
Come on
yeah.
out, let's graze. All right, my friend. Thank you so much. I love chatting with you. We're gonna have you back again because on and on. And those listening at Briarfest, happy Briarfest. Hopefully we can get Kim's cards on a horse here one of these
Absolutely.
days. And we will keep coming back for more. So
Great.
till
Thank
we
you so
meet
much.
again, happy
Bye,
trails.
everyone. Bye, Kat.
Bye.